You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, this is Richard Estep, ghostwriter, and from TV's Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal Investigators, Haunted Case Files, and Paranormal 911, and you are listening to PSH Radio on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening, guys. We are back, and this evening I am joined by Carl because he's not fully fit and healthy yet, but he's getting there. This evening we are going to be talking about filming and photography in the paranormal. So basically we've looked at a few articles of, apparent people capturing ghosts, and we're going to give our view on them, aren't we, Carl?
Well, first of all, I'd say hello, everybody, and I do apologise for not being around for a little while, being ill and all that sort of stuff, but I'm back, getting back to normal and planning and doing and being, but I'm great to be back on the Thursday night show. So, yes, we're going to be looking at photography, video evidence that's been captured in the paranormal, the pros, the cons, different types of scenarios, and also different types of each other's perception of the evidence that's been captured to see whether there is a link or whether it's just the normal on the internet.
Yeah, and also we're going to be looking at some famous ones and not so famous ones, so it's going to be a very open-minded show tonight, so apologies, guys.
No, don't apologise, because this, at the end of the day, this is a discussion show. We will give our opinions and the listeners will make up their own views, their own minds, because that is what the discussion show is all about. Because at the end of the day, we're not saying what we're going to discuss is paranormal, whether it's fake, whatever. We're just giving our own opinions over certain evidence that's been captured.
Yeah, I guess. So anyway, first one is a much famous one, which is obviously the ghost which was caught at Hampton Court Palace. I've seen it about on social media, this one, but I first saw it last week when I was looking up research for last week's show. Saw a video on YouTube of this footage. So obviously it's very interesting. Obviously watching the video myself, I have what's the word? Got my own opinions on this. I don't know about you, Carl. Obviously, you probably know about Hampton Court's Palace capture, don't you?
Well, this footage has been floating around social networks and video streaming services for a fair few years. It's basically a CCTV. Anybody that's not seen it, where have you been? Have you been hiding under a rock? But it's a CCTV clip of a small courtyard of Hampton Court, opposite some fire doors, and it's a security camera footage, and you see the security footage that the security doors open and a figure appears and then closes the doors, and the figure seems to be dressed in Elizabethan medieval type of dress. That's the footage.
Yeah. But they named it Skeletor. They named it Skeletor, was it?
Well, they're saying that the figure that appeared in the doorway was dressed in period costume, but had a face or some sort of, didn't really have a normal human face. And that's why they've sort of dubbed it on certain areas, the Skeletor, the Henry VIII footage, this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, there are reasons behind it. There are obvious reasons that people will look at it and go, okay, interesting. Mm-hmm. But there's also things that if you read about and go into a bit more depth about it, where the research, where you look at it and behind the movement, what was going on, what was happening in that particular area at the time, sort of gives away to it's paranormal. But then again, you flip it on the other side of the coin, you've got so many reasons to indicate that it was natural and everything like that. But
yeah, because to me, I was like, when I watched the obviously footage, I was like, well, how come you haven't captured it any other time and just this time once?
Well, that's one of the key things about it is you look at the footage, and anybody that's seen it, you'll see a camera on like a side courtyard of Hampton Court. There's a pair of fire doors, which all of a sudden open. You see like curtains fluffing in the background, and all of a sudden this figure appears, grabs both doors, and closes the doors. Yeah. So on one flip of the coin, you've got, is this a spirit? Is this a ghost of whatever haunts Hampton Court, closing the doors or whatever? But the main gist that when I researched this on social media and on the internet, is this is a natural phenomenon, which is basically the doors open because of wind. And as anybody that's been to Hampton Court, there are people wandering around in period costumes, and these people have then closed the door, and then on grainy CCTV camera, you are going to see something that looks very, very strange. Thus, i.e., the person doesn't have a face. It's not very, very good quality. Anybody that's seen it
yeah, I've seen it.
Anybody that's seen it, you will see it's a typical CCTV camera, unless you've got high-end HD cameras on your cameras. This is going to be very, very grainy. So there's going to be pixelations. There's going to be time distorts. So it's going to, and what you see is the doors open, there's a bit of a wind, fluttery curtains, then a figure appears in Elizabethan or period costume, ruffles the whole thing, closes the doors, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, that's obviously what I saw. Obviously, because it's the same footage.
It's the famous footage. It's one of the most. I've seen TV programs that are on different Sky networks and different satellite channels that have said this is paranormal evidence. This is only my opinion, and like I said, it's only my opinion, and I'm going to ask Sam the same question. My own personal opinion is it's not paranormal. It is probably down to anybody that knows security doors or even fire doors. They can basically, after time, just open, particularly in Hampton Court. I've been there at least 3 or 4 times where there's people walking around in period costumes, dressed up as period. So if a door opens, somebody could have walked past and nudged the bar and it opens, the person would open it and close it. The grainy footage would distort features, distort everything else. I would probably say that would be, if you put a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being legit, 1 being, it's your next door neighbour, whatever. I would put that probably on the lower end of probably 3 or 4, because there's so many reasons out there that potentially could explain that I would say it's not paranormal. What's your view, Sam?
Mine is probably the same because, like, to me, it's kind of just like it's probably just some sort of peers staff member who's dressed in period costumes, and it's kind of like you don't know because obviously there's a short period before you see the figure. You don't know if this staff member or whatever has seen the fire doors open and thought, "Oh yeah, I best shut them."
Exactly. At the end of the day, you see the footage. You see the doors open. Yes, legit. You see the doors open. You see the curtains blowing, which is wind, and then this figure appears and closes the doors. You put that in a legitimate way. If that person that closed the doors was in not period costume and was in a suit or a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, everybody would say, "No, that's basically somebody closing the doors when they opened." But because the figure appears to be in period costume, everybody then goes, "Hello, hang on. Let's think this could potentially be the ghost of Henry VIII closing the doors." Mm. Yes, he lived there, but when he lived there wasn't any modern day fire doors. So how did he know how to close them?
Yeah.
That's one of the most famous. That's one of the most famous ones that's been floating around on YouTube on the web for a long time about camera, particularly when it comes to CCTV. People put a lot of belief behind CCTV captures, but there is a lot of natural explanation about CCTV. It depends on how good the quality is.
See, this is why I have you on, because you know your CCTV.
Well, exactly. You at the end of the day, most places will have CCTV. The main reason people put CCTV up is to basically monitor a situation. They're not looking for things to be high definition, so they can basically pick up on things. They're looking for something that they can easily monitor, that has a video quality, but they're not looking at something that potentially could be face recognition, crystal clear, like you're looking at it on, say, the TV. So there's drawbacks of most CCTV cameras. Unless you've got high-end, top-of-the-range HD 4K video cameras, it's going to be grainy, it's going to have lag, it's going to have this and that and the other, and that's what I would describe this particular bit of evidence as. It's a CCTV camera that picks something opening and picks a figure closing it, but there is so many reasons behind it that would say it's natural or non-paranormal to it is, then it's a paranormal idea.
Yeah. So which one shall we discuss next, Carl?
Well, that would be up to you, Sam. You tell me and we'll just crack on to it.
Right. Let's do the another famous photo of the Wem ghost girl, which was captured because obviously Wem Town Hall was set alight in November 1995. So we shall talk about that one.
Is this because as people won't know, but Sam knows and Kerry knows and everything like that. I've been doing a load of research to look at, and I ended up getting sidetracked and ended up laughing at YouTube for a little while last night. Can Sam just explain to the viewers what this particular one looks like, so I can quickly go through my notes and while she's saying that, please?
Yeah. So basically, an actual sewage farm worker took this photo. His name was Tony O'Reilly. Mm-hmm. And he stood across why obviously the 19-year-old building in Wem, Shropshire was burnt down in November 1995. And this photo is a clear oldish photo, I'd say, of that era, of obviously the building on fire, and there's a girl stood in the doorway with, I'd say, a white dress and short hair and like a flower headband thing.
Yeah, this is the one that is the photo that looks like this figure is standing on a balcony through a doorway, isn't it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like the one we just discussed. This is quite a famous photo. Back in that day, it's not a modern photo. It's quite an old photo. So you've got to then look, from my point of view, being an equipment geek, you then have to think about what type of apparatus these people were taking these photos with, because as time goes on, modern technology, there's different types of technology. But back in those days, this was what I can research about it was taken on a normal camera, which had to be developed, and then all of a sudden, when they picture up this picture of the burning building, there is a doorway, there's a balcony you can see this figure standing on the balcony. Is that right, Sam?
Yep.
Okay, so old-time cameras are used where basically they use light. You take something, you put it onto a negative, you then produce the photograph. Different apertures, different speeds of light coming in will then produce the photo.
Yeah.
This one I would put into the scenario of more credible to not, in my eyes, or it could be because of one reason only at those sort of times, unless it's been adapted over the years and played around with. But the research I've done, where I've looked at photos and I've looked at the dates of these photos and looked at basically anybody that hasn't tried to manipulate, like put it like negative and stuff like that. So you're looking at the original photograph. Yes, it does look like there's a figure of a girl standing on a balcony, but being level-headed and looking at it, unless I know exactly what camera it was, how it was taken, how it was developed, because it would have had to been developed. Would it have been an overexposure? Would it have been this? Would it have been that? But on a looking at the stuff that we've looked at over research for this show, this is a more of a credible photo. Do you not agree?
I know what it is. So.
Well, you tell me.
Well, drum roll. It is actually a living Well, she's not. I don't think she's living now. But basically, this elderly gentleman, who is 77, basically debunked this photo by looking at a postcard which was dated from 1922, and this is what he's basically. He was basically a retired engineer from Shrewsbury, and this is what he said. He said, "I was intrigued to find that she bore a striking likeness to the little girl featured as the Wem ghost." He said, "Her dress, bonnet, and ribbon appear to be identical." Basically, this girl was hit. Well, the ghost image obviously was created into international headlines, but the girl who was pictured in the photo was 14-year-old Jane Chirm, who accidentally started a disastrous fire in Wem in 1677. Obviously, the cause of the fire in 1995 remains a mystery, but yeah, Mr. O'Reilly, who obviously took the photo, died in 2005 of a heart attack. But this postcard, basically, the girl looks exactly the same.
So what you're saying, it potentially could have been an overexposure or a photograph that was taken with old-time camera back in the day that was manipulated by natural phenomenon.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
I've obviously just... looking at the research earlier as well, some photographic experts have said that it could have been the trick of the light caused by the fire.
Yep. Well, of course, because obviously you've got a natural occurrence where you've got fire, which is manipulating light, which is manipulating that. And if you are taking something that any camera has a split-second aperture and you're taking it, you're going to produce something. And if it's having something that flickers, it's going to produce not a true. So it's going to look distorted. It's going to look this. It's going to look that. So, yeah, I would say that. But if you flip it back and you look at it just on base level, it's probably one of the photographs you look at and go, yeah, there's reasons behind it, but there's other reasons not behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I think the whole thing about photography and video on paranormal stuff is every single thing that we will talk about and every other thing that people will look at, there's going to be people that go, hang on, there's this, there's that, there's this, pros and cons on everything, because of the whole manipulation of how photography, video, what you use, how you use it. Is there any false positives to the camera? Is it this? Is it that? So everything that we're going to discuss, there's going to be reasons behind it that people are going to say yay or nay to.
Mm. Mm. And also, like, what I found interesting to read about, obviously, as well, because obviously we know that sometimes if people have taken a photograph, photography people do actually go and look at the photo, and basically this photography guy said it could have been the similar photograph process which they use in Edwardian era mediums, who basically they captured an image of a spirit with their relatives during the relatives' consultations as a way of boosting their credibility.
Yeah, but the problem you've got is if you go back to the time that these photos that were taken, they're not using modern day equipment. It's not talking digital. We're not talking this, that, and the other. We are talking, you basically have a camera, you have a film where you open light to, you then get a film, a projection onto that, and then it's captured, and then you develop that picture.
Yeah,
it's more difficult to fake that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Nowadays, but people in those days really weren't doing that. There are some very famous cases, which we'll probably get onto in a bit, where people have tried to do that and whatever. But it's more difficult because if you look at it's the negative that you need to be looking at, and you look at the negative. If they can produce a negative, that's the thing that people will then look at when you're taking that sort of photography. But when you look at modern day stuff on video, on cameras, they're modern, they're digital. You can play around with it. You can put things in. You can Photoshop. You can do all sorts of things like that. So you've just got to be you've got to be open-minded, completely open-minded when it comes to these things that get posted.
Yeah, and I think like what is good with obviously when we've looked at this research and seen at the old photos is obviously they wouldn't have they obviously, like you said, all their films were on negative, so they had the strip strips, didn't they? And obviously
the proper negatives. Anybody knows hotel photography. I remember this when I was young, and I'm not that old. You used to take photos. You used to take them into your snappy prints in the co-op. You handed your film in, your little canister of film. They handed you your pictures a week later, and inside was the negatives, which was actually the film which had been developed. So you could then look at those. So, and that's not too far. Now, I'm not that old. I may look it now and again, but I'm not that old. So people back then, it's not that period of time that we were literally producing photos via film. Nowadays, it's camera, it's digital, blah, 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 blah. But back in the day, and going back even further, when the cameras first came out, you took a photo and you had to basically stand there for like 30 minutes before you could actually move, so you got the photograph. So if you moved a little bit and there's this distortion on the plate, people are going to jump to conclusions. So there's these reasons behind any type of photography where you can So, yeah, it could be this, but 9 times out of 10, it could be a natural phenomenon.
Yeah, you find like a lot that still like in our era as well, though, don't you? Especially like if people are using phones and you still. So it's it's like same like when I was doing my research earlier, I saw a few, and it was like, yeah, that's clearly someone's just moved and you've took the photo. And obviously there's a few where people have stood behind them and they're like, no one was stood behind us, and you like can clearly see that someone was stood behind them.
When you come to modern photos that are taken, because it's so easy, because everybody has a smartphone, everybody basically has a camera in their pocket. There's this major issue that I have with camera phones. And that's is people post it, and I must admit, I put my hands up. I've taken photos and gone, hang on, what's that? And then you realise and you look back at it, and as everybody should do when you're in doing things, take a series of photos, not just take one, because you can never rely on just one photo. You need a series of photos. You need before and you need an after, and what's in between, if anything captures, is more interesting because you've got a series of photos. But with camera phones, the biggest drawback, the biggest fault positive of all camera phones, whether you've got an Apple, whether you've got an Android, whether you've got a Windows phone, every single camera phone has a split-second delay before you take a photo. So if what you see on your screen is perfectly in focus, and then you take that photo, and it'll look like the picture will appear as it's taken, and then all of a sudden you move a split second. We're talking second, not even a second. We're talking split seconds. You move slightly, your photo is going to be distorted. Everybody's taking these photos. Everybody, if you've got a camera phone on an iPhone, if you've got the live function where you will take a photo and you'll see this little blur. Most of it is just that split second when somebody moves. So modern day photographs and modern day footage is more easier to pull apart than stuff that was done via physical film, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember Sage Paracon when we were taking photos in the cottage, and it was your jacket.
Exactly.
And we were all like freaking out.
You take photos. I've taken photos. I remember 2 years ago, I was at Sage Paracon. We were at Warwick Castle, and I was in charge of making sure that groups move between investigation locations. But while the people were investigating in the different locations, I had a bit of time to kill. So I'd be sat around outside, and there was one time that I was sat outside Warwick Castle, sat on the steps waiting for my cue on the microphone to go and move guests between things. And I just thought, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to... I was outside the alleged ghost tower at Warwick Castle. I thought I'd just take my iPhone out and just record the courtyard. So I sat there and I just recorded 2 long footages of me just panning from the ghost tower to the bear pit all the way around. And I took 2 videos. Didn't think anything of it. Moved guests around. We got to the point where we went to a break. And I went and looked at this footage, and I saw something in one video, and it wasn't in the second. So I played the second one. I was playing the second one. I was looking at, and it was like, okay, what is that? I knew it wasn't paranormal because I couldn't see it with my eyes or whatever, but it just looked weird. And Ashley Knibb, the professor, was on the investigation, so he was in there. So I was talking to him. Unknown to me, he'd only just done a blog that day about iPhone and certain 2 models of iPhone. When you record in low light, you get a white dot that dances around the screen.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what I picked up on. So this looks like there's a fairy running around my screen. Like a goal, like, Tinkerbell, whatever you want to call it, is bouncing around the screen. I knew that it must be something to do with the phone, but I wanted to speak to Ashley because obviously me and Ashley talk about this sort of stuff, and we talk about different elements of it. And he went, "You won't believe this, but literally that day he'd posted a blog about the drawbacks of the 7 and the 6 and the 7 iPhones that have, in a certain low light, that you record something and you get this white glow that dances around your screen on video." And that's exactly what it is. Like we said, it's not paranormal, but it's good to get something that go, hang on, it's actually what you're using, what you're recording on, that has this drawback. So if you know about that and you can discount that, you can then move on from it.
Yeah. Well, that's what you find, obviously, with a lot of things in this era now. I keep saying era, but that's what you find with a lot of phones and photography cameras now. Like if you're filming or taking a photo, light can proper mess up your photos.
Oh, absolutely. Light. And it also can come down to the speed you take a photo, particularly on modern cameras that, okay, you're not doing digital. Yeah, well, you're doing digital, but you've still got light aperture, you've got speed aperture, you've got all these different settings. You can set one of these modern DLR cameras to natural, and it will basically judge everything that's going on, and it'll take it to the best appropriate settings. Yes, that's great, but potentially, why would that photograph be completely natural? Because maybe something that those natural settings hadn't picked up on, and you pick up on that on the screen.
Yeah, I think obviously DSLR cameras. I wish if delay as well, because obviously what you find with proper photography cameras is obviously the lenses close quicker than.
It comes down to the quickness of the camera, the quickness that you take the photo. What are your views, Sam? Do you think modern professional cameras, that is digital, or would you prefer to have proper old school where you actually have to develop what you take?
I'd say both, because but use both, say in the same area, because then you could look at one set of photos and then look at the other set of photos, and then if you captured something on one, then you could be okay. Well, I haven't captured it on this one. Which
is great if you're in a controlled experiment and you've got the ability to at simultaneously take a digital and a normal photo, and then that's the ideal opportunity. But when you look at what's on social media, what's been posted, what goes out, what goes on YouTube, there isn't those controlled explanations. No. So you have to take it on face value most of the time. And that's the difficult thing that we're discussing tonight, is it's personal opinion of what you see.
Yeah. And it's obviously people who post these, you tell them how it's not and they swear blind that it's paranormal.
Well, the problem you got is these are people, this is the whole thing about the paranormal, it's personal experiences. People will swear blind what happened, they absolutely believe. And there's people out there that will have an explanation of everything that this person is swearing happened for real, and they will say other things to say that it's not real. It's personal experience. And kind of with cameras and photos that you take, it's kind of like that. Unless you're in a control situation where you're being monitored taking these photos. So there's photos of you taking the photos, and you are then taking multiple photos. So you've got photos of you taking the photos, so you can look at what's behind, what's going on in a controlled situation. Yeah, that's great. But 9 times out of 10, what gets posted, what goes on social media, what goes on YouTube is one photo, one video, no explanation, no real rundown of how they did it, what was there, what was going on around them. It's like, this is this. But, as I said, people post stuff and they believe what they post. And it's open to then your own interpretation of it. And that's when what we discuss, and paranormal investigators will discuss over a beer, paranormal investigators will discuss whatever, and they will throw this subject around and around and around and around. But it's your own personal view on a particular thing. And as any paranormal experience happen, unless you are physically there, you're going to have questions. If you were physically there and you did but somebody else is going, well, hang on, that could have been somebody walking across sharp, blah, 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 but because they weren't there. So that's the key. That is the key about any of this evidence, any video, anything. You have to then interpret your own views, whether you were there, and if you were there, if you weren't there, you have to have your own view. So it's own personal interpretation of any photo or video.
Yeah. So the wonderful Ash is in the chat room. He's posted that link to the actual blog you were just talking about.
Yeah.
In there.
But it's amazing because at the end of the day, I'd actually taken this footage. It was a new phone, and I'd just been messing around while waiting to go from a group, and I recorded it, and it literally looked like something was, this little silver thing was bouncing around the screen. I knew when you viewed it, I knew it wasn't paranormal. I knew it had to be something about the camera. And that's why I spoke to Ashley. And I didn't know that he'd posted something. So that's the thing. It's talking about an interpreting, looking at something that potentially there's a logical explanation. Me and Ashley then came to that, which you never knew. There could have been somebody out there that took that footage and then posted it and said, I see a fairy running around the grounds of Warwick Castle, without actually looking at it.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with social media and the web. It's people's own interpretation. It's people's knowledge that they don't understand. They'll just basically gloss over their gaps in their knowledge and post it.
Yeah, and it goes to the old pareidolia. Yeah, it's pareidolia, isn't it?
Well, you got several different types of pareidolia. You've got visual pareidolia, you've got verbal pareidolia, you've got hearing pareidolia. You've got everything pareidolia. Because I have this thing that is a great experiment. I have a recording which, if you play to somebody on a loop, they will hear words. They will hear a sentence. Every single person I've played it to will hear a sentence. There's no words, there's no sentence, but because the brain is programmed to make words out of what they think they hear it. It's the same with sight, visual pareidolia. Your brain is triggered to make the assumptions you are seeing something, and it will then basically say, right, okay, I'm seeing a face, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that. So that's where it comes, visual and auditory pareidolia.
He asks us both in the chat room, Ash again, did your research get you to the skull experiment, as they done some fantastic, remarkable work with video and photographs, but perhaps from a little bit of a different perspective?
Well, the skull experiment is a very interesting scenario, and I don't think it's... Yes, I've researched it, but I don't think at the moment what we're talking about stuff that's been posted. We're not talking about full, detailed, proper scientific research into it. We're talking about stuff that people post online, stuff that people post on videos. So the skull experiment, Ashley and I completely agree. What they've come up with, what they produce, is very, very interesting. But I think that's a more of a controlled. It is. It's a more of a controlled way of doing stuff with evidence, which you then look at. With what we're saying about is photographs from history, famous cases, flaws and positives from modern day equipment in a day-to-day life, not as in a sterilized, controlled, scientific manner, if that makes sense. But I'm happy to discuss the skull experiment in more detail if you want to.
So obviously continuing on in this era a little bit before we go back in the day. So I know obviously you're a tech guy.
I have my moments.
You have your moments.
Have moments with equipment. Yes, I'm not. I wouldn't say. No, I am. I'm Mr. Gadget.
So how does infrared work?
Oh wow! Well. Right, infrared is one of the light sources. One of the light sources is there's so many different things that make up the light spectrum. And you go from infrared, ultraviolet, blah, 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 all the way around the spectrum. Infrared is just one of the light specs that you can basically manipulate when you're taking a photo or you're doing a video, where you basically then produce a filter on your camera or on your thing that will produce a thing that is taking something in infrared. You can then do something on the flip side. You can then look at something taking it on ultraviolet. You can then look at full spectrum, which is basically incorporating everything. Which the easiest way to explain it is, if you watch a TV program, you see everybody in green. That is night vision. That's one of the light spectrum. That's basically so you can see in the dark. Everybody's in green. You then start moving around the clock, so you go from one clock to another. You go into full spectrum, and the screen or what you take turns into like a purpley sort of colour. So there's that. And then you've got the other way. You go the other way, and then you're taking photos in near darkness with a camera, which is like night, and you're taking something which is then producing a photo that you can actually see in that way. So it depends on what your camera is, what it's set up to, what your video camera is, whether it's a full spectrum, whether it's an IR, whether it's this, that, and the other, to indicate which spectrum you're looking at. What I've been looking at is a way that, and it's very difficult because you have to set your cameras up for one or the other. So what I've been looking at, and which I've been looking at for 4 or 5, well, probably the last 6 months, is a way you can take a photo and you capture it on every single possible spectrums. The way I've seen it before is you need multiple devices to take it in multiple different, because you have to have IRs, you have to have this, that, and the other to actually do that. So what I want to see is whether there's a link between activity that triggers something, and then you can see whether you can then look at different forms of light spectrum to see if there's anything there.
Sounds interesting.
It's very interesting, but it's difficult.
Pain in the ass.
It's a difficult thing to basically put down on paper to actually get your head around, to realise how it would actually work. And if there's anybody listening that knows more about photography than I do, and I know the basics, and what I need to know is there any way that you can take a photo that can take a photo in every possible light spectrum at the same time with the same device? That's what I want to know. So you can then basically produce a photo that you take that split second, and you get every possible photo from IR, ultraviolet, all the way around the spectrum. That's what I want to think. That's what I'm trying to get my head around at the moment. Anybody listening, Ashley, if you know anybody or anybody else that's listening on speaker after we've done it, get in touch on my social media links. I've got this thing in my head that I need to understand. I've got this experiment I want to do. So.
That That'd actually be interesting though, because obviously I'm into my photography and that, but I don't know that.
Exactly. Nor do I. I know the principles behind it, but how you put that in place, it's like most of my half-brain coat in my head, my banana brain ideas. It's like I have these ideas, and then it's trying to work out how I put those into physical practice and how I can use it in an experimental or controlled way and know the false positive. I have so many books upstairs where I've written these things that I'm thinking, if you did this, could you then do that? But then I haven't worked out how I do the whole thing. So I look at these every so often and go through them after and think, right, I still don't know how that works, so I push that back. And then other times you look at other things that I wrote 4 or 5 years ago that modern technology you can now do, such as infrasound and slowing things down and EVPs. I thought about this before, is whether you could then take something where you could then flick all the way through the how it was recorded, particularly a voice, and now you can do that. So I'm sure you can do this with cameras and video cameras, but I'm not. I know my equipment, but I don't know when it comes to the technical side of it. I need help on that. So if there's anybody listening, get in touch with me, because I have these half-baked ideas in my head, and I just need somebody to be able to go, yeah, you're talking rubbish, Carl. You can't do that at the moment, or hang on, you can do it this way.
Funnily enough, Ash has said, are you talking about full spectrum on the same exposure? Would that work?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where you can take a photo or a video, and when you can then when you look at it, you can break it down, and you can go from one spectrum to that same photo or same video clip. You can break it down, and you can go through all the different spectrums, and you can then look piece by piece by piece. So if you capture something, you can go to the video, you can go to the audio, you can go to the picture you take with the camera or the video clip, and you can then basically break it down into the different. So you can then look at it on full spectrum. You can look at it on IR. You can look at it in infrared. You can look at it at low level. You can look at it at high level. So you break it down. You can then view it. So you can then look at it on the individual, but then you can look at it as a package. So something that you can look all the way through the streams. That's this crazy idea I've got in my head, which to this day, I don't know whether it's possible.
There you are, Ash. I'm sure if you still didn't go and get what he means, I'm sure you'll talk on Facebook at some point and he can explain better.
Well, it's basically to do with you take something on full spectrum, which is obviously every single light spectrum, and then you're able to break it down.
Sorry to interrupt him. He says, so you could layer the various light spectrums and change your view like layers in Photoshop.
Yes, that's it.
That's why we call him Professor Ash.
without the whole thing about that. So you have to have a camera that can take that, or the video camera that can take it in all that, and then you can then break it down, not just by manipulating. You're talking about taking it at different levels. So you have the full spectrum, you have the IR, you have this, you have that. So it all takes the same photo, so you can click on them without basically pulling apart the one stream, if that makes sense. This is far too technical. This is not what we're supposed to be talking about.
It always happens, doesn't it, on every show? We kind of go off the subject a little bit, and then I'm just sat here like, what?
It would be as if we didn't go on to different subjects.
No, so anyway, moving on. So this is another very interesting one. This is called, well, the actual person in the photo they have called him the Boot Hill Ghost because
Is this the photo of the guy with the cowboy hat?
Yeah.
With the great moustache, and there's somebody in the background who they say is.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't remember who they're supposed to be. Is it like Billy the Kid or something? in the photo. And it says Boot Hill, and there's a figure standing between a cactus, and there's this bloke who's pretending to be a cowboy with a gun and everything like that, and behind him was nothing. And when they took the photo or the video, there's a figure that everybody thinks is the ghost of Billy the Kid or something.
Mm. Yeah, he was apparently someone who was in a gang or something.
Yeah, Billy the Kid. I'm just clicked on. They believe it could be Billy the Kid or something, and
looks nothing like Billy the Kid.
I don't know what Billy the Kid looked like, but I can understand what they say. It is a photograph of a bloke, and there is a bloke standing behind him, off camera, way back, that is standing there in the photo. Yeah.
Mm.
But we go back to one thing only. Unless you were there, you don't know whether there was actually somebody standing there at the time or not.
No, and obviously looking at the research, which obviously I found like a bit interesting, really interesting. They actually
Sorry.
In photo, I think they must have done it in Photoshop or something, but they actually put a mannequin next to this photo.
Yeah, I'm just watching. I'm sorry, that was what the thing. As I clicked on the video of this photo, and I'm just watching it now. So they've got this camera. They've got this. Yeah. They're going to put a mannequin where this person was stood to try and produce where this person was.
Yeah,
which is great, because any day that's a good thing to do, because you're going to go there and you're going to think. But they're not using the same equipment that the camera was taken. They're not. They don't know the certain light filters. They don't know the atmospherics of what was going. So basically, they're just standing in what they think's the right place, taking a photo to see whether anything appears.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, quite a few tried to reenact it though, didn't they? You had the people who do haunted saloon, and then obviously you had Ghost Lab.
Yeah, but the thing is, the original photograph was taken at a particular time. The atmospherics was one thing. It was taken with this bit of equipment. It was taken at this time of day. It was taken with this exposure, this, that, and the other. So many factors to produce the original photograph. To my knowledge, there's nobody that's ever tried to recreate that has done the exact same thing. Same camera, same time of day, same environmentals, blah, 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 blah. That's the true way of producing it. You can. It's like me taking a photo of standing above Dover with my video camera, photographing a ferry, and then basically somebody standing there with a high definition 4K camera, and somebody standing there with a camera that you need a light exposure, 30 seconds, this, that, and the other. You're going to get the same picture, but you're going to get different pictures of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's kind of a bit weird as well, because obviously, like you said earlier, they said that they didn't see the apparent person until they look back, but back in them days they wouldn't have been able to look back at it until they've took the negatives.
Well, at the end of the day, it's taking a photo. You're taking a moment in time. It's not like a video camera. It's not like you're going to have CCTV around you. You're going to take a photo of a particular moment in time and have no way of going back and looking at it. You have to take it on face value by looking at the negatives. Modern day, you could take a photo in an environment, say down Warwick Castle or Oxford Street. There's going to be CCTV cameras on you, so you could then go, well, hang on, was there anybody around when this photograph was taken? One of the cases recently is MJ's photo at Warwick Castle, when she took a photo of a thing, and there's a figure reflecting behind her, but when you look at the footage of the CCTV cameras of MJ taking the photo, there's no mannequin, there's nobody that comes in the room on the CCTV, because it's the CCTV camera of the room. Sees MJ, takes a photo, nobody else is in there. So that is when you then overlay it and go, right, okay, on that photo, I've taken something. You can then look at other ways of saying, backing it up and saying, well, there wasn't a mannequin in the window. There wasn't anybody that walked in behind you.
Mm.
Those days, you take a photo and you're going to have to take it on face value.
Mm. Yeah, because obviously they went into this research, didn't they? And obviously they came up with one of the theories that it could have been a mannequin.
Yeah.
But
there's so many different. Yeah. You look at that one. It's like most of these famous cases could have been a mannequin. Could have been somebody in shot that just popped its head up. Could have been anything. And then they'd say, "Oh, it looks like this famous person. It looks like Billy the Kid. It looks like this." La la. Okay, all of them could have been possible explanations. But unless you were physically there and you have some way of recording it, you ain't going to tell either way whether it was a mannequin standing in the field, whether it was somebody who stood up by mistake, across the shot. You ain't going to do that. You have to take it on face value and your own personal belief. Sadly.
Yeah.
Those type of photos you do, because we're not saying, say, the photographs we say of the child on the balcony in a fire, which was a photograph that could have been this, that, and the other. This is a photo of some bloke standing there pretending to be a cowboy, and behind him, a picture of Boot Hill behind him, and there's a figure standing up. There's a head and shoulders above some grass.
Yeah.
You have to look at it in various different ways.
Yeah. Anyway, also, guys, if you're in the chat room and want to see this photo, feel free to let me know, and you can contact me or whatever, and we'll send you the link. Just want to put that out there.
And also, if you want to see about the photograph that MJ took at Warwick Castle, which is an amazing photo when you actually look at it, and then look at the background of it. There was video of her going in the room on her own, nobody else in the room, no mannequin, and she gets this photo of a figure in the window behind her when she was taking a picture of a plaque. That's great, so we'll post that link as well.
Yeah, and going back to this one we've just been on about, Boot Hill Ghost, to me, it's too clear.
The problem you got is a ghost. Can a ghost be clear on camera? We don't know that.
I know.
We don't know. That's the thing. We're speculating. It's too clear. It must be real. At the end of the day, that could be. We don't know this. It's our own personal views. That could be a ghost on camera. We don't know that because we're taking it on face value. Until we experience it and see it for our own self, take a photo, and then we see something, we're never going to realise whether it is or it isn't. We're going to believe what we believe. And those sort of photographs, unless there was other photograph evidence at the time from different angles, you're not going to say whether that's a ghost or whether that's a mannequin, whether that's actually a real person, are you, Sam?
No, or like there's a negative of this photo.
A double exposure or whatever. That's the nature of photographs back in the day, is you have to take them on face value. Yes, there's ways of looking at it, say whether it's a double exposure or whether it's this, that, and the other. But when you cross all them out, at the end of the day, you're left with a photograph that you haven't got any backup, no other photographs from the side, no other photographs of this, that, and the other, which most people in the paranormal will understand. If you're taking photos, you take a series of photographs, you've got video, you've got somebody else videoing you, so you've got two different streams to look at. And that's the thing about it. And I think going forward into the future, we're going to be looking at these. We're going to be looking at multi-angle photos. When you take a photo, it takes a photo of you and the surroundings and where you're pointing it.
Yeah, it's like just a quick one because we're obviously coming to the end of the show. It's like this 3D camera now people use when they do Facebook Lives.
Well, the 3D camera that is legitimate, because at the end of the day, all it is, it's a fish lens that basically will give you a 360. It's basically like a mirror. It's like the funhouse effect, where you're standing there and you can see all the way around you because it's mirrors, and that's all that 360 is. It's exactly the same thing. And when you produce it and when you can do it, you can interact because it's a series of shots that you can then scroll around, so you can actually then have the 360 look. It's just a series of shots taken very, very quickly in a scenario in a camera, which can take a 360 degree angle of it. So it's what it is there's drawbacks to it, because there can be points where there's all these photographs taken at the same time, but there's still that split second thingy. But when you put it on a stream, and you can then manipulate, and you can, I want to go and see it to the left, or I want to see it to the right. That's happening, but it's not happening live. There's a split second that it's not. So
yeah. Just another quick one. Ash says 3D photography will be great for mapping locations.
Of course it would. Yeah. 3D would. 3D, thermal, geophysics, everything. Anything that we can basically look in a more than one dimension
in the bigger picture, like
yeah. It's like the whole thing about people saying, "Oh, we can pick up on ley lines, we can pick up on the energy." But if you've got a device that can basically pick on the atmospherics or the environmental that can produce the ley lines physically, which I know there are cameras out there that can do, they can pick up on this, they can pick up on that. Where they go up to the geophys cameras, where it's bouncing things into the ground and this, that, and the other. But they're very, very expensive. But there are available. There ain't many people out there that can bring a geophys camera onto a paranormal investigation, because it ain't bloody cheap.
So, anyway, we've come to the end of the show, Carl.
Wow!
Another one done. So, anything you want to say?
No, I love these sort of discussion shows, because it's like I said when we started it, it's not my personal opinion. I'm just looking at it from a point of view from somebody that's looking at all aspects of it. It's like I say, I'm not saying any photograph, any video is fake, any video is paranormal. I'm going from a point of view where I look at it, I see it, I will then look at it from different aspects and make my own personal view up. So I'm never poo-pooing anything. And if you've got photographs that you think are interesting, send them over, because I love to see them. Videos, I love to see them. And just basically send me these sort of stuff. You got social media, we'll post them, whatever. Same as you, Sam. You've researched this all week. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, and the funny.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the people that posted the good, the bad, and the ugly aren't thinking they're the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's their own personal view. And that's what I want to say is, I'm not saying any photograph or anything is this, that, and the other. It's my personal view on where I look at it from a point of view, how you can look at it from another point of view to give you a reason what you're seeing, instead of jumping to the conclusion it's paranormal.
Mm-hmm. With that said, guys, thank you everyone for in the chat room. It's always a pleasure, even if you're new to this show or, well, new to listening to us, obviously PSH Radio, because we've not long since been on Parasearch Radio. It's nearly 2 months now. What else?
And I'd just like to say, it's great to be back, and I'll be back on more often. Tomorrow night, I'm back on the Dark Mirror show at 9 o'clock, talking about some great stuff, listening to there. But what I want to do is big thank you personally to Sam, who's been running the show. Obviously the mouthpiece that comes on and waffles for a little bit, but Sam's the brains behind the organisation. So a big thank you to Sam.
Cool. It's always a pleasure, Carl. Anyway, guys, if you're new, like I say, if you're new to this show, or new to Parasearch Radio, you can, if you want to listen to more shows, because obviously we're not the only ones on this network, you can go click on our Spreaker profile, and all there you have the rest of the archive shows. You can also find us on YouTube if you search Parasearch Radio, where the shows go up on there. And it's a good night from me.
And it's a good night from me as well.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.